Hi everyone, my name is Emily and welcome to Support for Sophie, a channel that I've dedicated to me and my dog Sophie. I'm going to start the channel off by sharing Sophie's story, and it's kind of a long one, so buckle up. If you've heard this before from our TikTok or our Instagram, thank you for listening again, but if you're new here, welcome, and I hope that you're inspired by Sophie's story and you stick around for Sophie's journey. So Sophie is a complete sweetheart. She is 9 years old and she has something called intervertebral disc disease, also known as IVDD. If you're unfamiliar, because I certainly was, IVDD is a disease that affects the dog's back and their spinal cord. What happens is the discs in the back can herniate and it causes spinal cord compression, which causes severe pain and in some cases paralysis. Sophie was diagnosed in 2020 when she was just 6 years old. She was laying on my lap on the couch and out of nowhere she just screamed in pain. Like, I've never heard her cry like this before. She didn't want to move, she didn't want to be touched. I took her to the emergency vet where they gave her an MRI and diagnosed her with IVDD. I had no idea what IVDD was. They told me to take her home, put her on strict crate rest, give her medications, and even suggested acupuncture. Sophie's recovery seemed to be doing great. She was not having many issues, she was finally in a good spot, and then one night a dog got off of its leash, ran up to her at our apartment, and attacked her. It reset her recovery. It was heartbreaking, but she was a trooper and got through it. Once again, everything seemed to be going well. She was going back to her usual self. She wanted to play toys. She didn't seem to be in any pain. And then our worst nightmare happened. Last January, Sophie became paralyzed in her back legs. This is one of the worst things that we have had to go through with Sophie's IVDD. It started off like a usual day. I was going to hand her a treat. She came running around the corner and then she cried out in pain and did not want to move. She was just panting and I was sitting there petting her. I was crying. I was on the phone with the emergency vets and they're like, bring her in. So I drove her in and she did not want to walk. When she did, her back legs were super wobbly. They called it the drunk sailor walk or an ataxic gait for a more professional diagnosis. And once again, they told us strict crate rest, give her medicine. And the next morning I woke up, checked on her, and she could not use her back legs at all. I was heartbroken. I was extremely scared. I was super stressed out. I did not know what to do. I called the emergency vet back and they're like, I'm sorry, our MRI machine is down and we can't take her. Try to call these other veterinary places. So I called like 6 different places. They weren't taking anybody or they didn't have someone. It was the weekend. So finally I contacted this hospital in the city and they're like, go back to the other animal hospital. If they determine it's an emergency, we will take her and we will only take her then. So back we went and they were like, yeah, she's paralyzed, this is an emergency, and they transferred us to the hospital in Philadelphia. The ride was gut-wrenching. I just was holding her. I could just tell in her face that she knew something was wrong. Like, she couldn't use her back legs. Like, I can't imagine what she was thinking. Finally, we got there. They took her away from me and I didn't get to see her for like 3 days. That same day, they performed an emergency surgery on her back, her lumbar discs, to try to relieve the compression on her spinal cord. I was a nervous wreck. I'm trying not to get emotional thinking about it, but it was horrible. I remember them telling me, you know, there's no guarantee that she'll walk again. We can't promise anything, but they gave us a 95% chance of success, and I just hoped and prayed that it would work out. I didn't know what to expect. Like I said, I've never gone through this before. I've never had to care for a disabled animal. So when the surgery was over and her 2 days recovering in the hospital, they were like, yeah, there's not too much function return yet. So when she came home, she was still paralyzed, and I was scared and nervous. I didn't know what to do, what to expect. You know, how does she go to the bathroom? It's stuff that you just don't you just don't know what to do. Of course, speaking of going to the bathroom, she was having an issue urinating. They could not get her to urinate, and they could not express manually, they could not express her bladder. They considered catheterizing her, but then she would, like at the 24-hour mark, have this big spill of urine, so they kept putting it off. They sent her home and she would not go. So I had to take her back. They did an ultrasound and they're like, there's not that much urine. They gave us some medicine, sent her back home, and then finally, I've never been so happy to see pee in my life. And comes another issue is the dog urinates, you know, there's no control over it. So I would go to check on her and there would be urine in there. She would be sometimes soaked in it. I'd have to clean her up, make sure that she wasn't getting scolded by the urine or sitting in it, you know. So it was challenging. I had to do like these little physical therapy exercises with her limbs to try to promote like the muscle activation and try to get it so her muscles weren't tight. So the weeks following, we slowly started to see some foot motion, which turned into like little leg motions, which turned into her trying to make steps, which finally turned into her actually trying to step. And then as time went on, she learned to walk again. She started physical therapy, I think at the 4-week mark after her surgery, and they put her in a water treadmill to teach her to walk again. Her physical therapy team is the best. I am super thankful for these people. They are amazing. So she was learning to walk again. Everything seemed to be going smoothly. And then in March, she herniated a disc again. When I tell you I was crushed and devastated, I mean it. I could not believe that this had happened again. This time there was no incident. I don't even know how it started, how it happened. I was just laying with her in her bed and I noticed her, like by her back legs, there was like a spasm. And I was like, that's weird. She had physical therapy that night, so Tyler had took her there. And I was like, please mention it to them, just see what they say. And I had to go to work and my heart dropped when my phone rang. I knew something was wrong. Picked up the phone. He was like, I'm really sorry, you're not gonna believe this, but she herniated another disc. And I sobbed. They sent me home from work. I went straight to the hospital because, you know, it's like the same building, and I just couldn't believe it. Like, how does this happen again? It was horrible. I just felt so bad for her. I just couldn't believe that she had to go through all of this stuff. She's just a little dog and she's so sweet and she doesn't deserve these things to happen to her. So once again, they sent us home with medicine and crate rest, and they're like, hopefully she responds to the conservative treatment and doesn't need surgery. But her physical therapist was like, look, you really might want to consider surgery. It's the only way to guarantee that it gets fixed. And I was like, okay, we'll see how she responds. We'll see what happens. I brought her home, and just like the last time, she started with the wobbly walking, and I was like, oh my God, like, she just learned to walk again. Like, please don't let her be paralyzed. So the next morning, I got her up. Thankfully, she's able to walk, but it was like she started falling down. She wasn't able to hold herself upright. And I just knew as soon as she was falling down that I needed to take her back. So I brought her back, and her neurologist saw her and was like, yeah, I recommend surgery. So she had a second surgery. The reason why it was so emergent was because this had just happened, and they didn't want her, like, the next step was she was going to be paralyzed, and they didn't want her to get to that point again, because there's no guarantee, like, once you get to that level of spinal compression, there's just no guarantee that you can come back from that. So in she went, and I was like shattered. I just, like I said, I couldn't believe this was happening again. Luckily, the surgery went good. We brought her home the next day, and I have to say, her neurologist, this was not at the city hospital, this was a different hospital. Her neurologist that we have is the best. He is such a great guy, just like her rehab team. I love them all to death, and I am so thankful that they are part of Sophie's team. So anyway, we brought her home and started the recovery all over again. So recovery from surgery is 8 weeks of crate rest. So she just got off of crate rest for the 8 weeks, and now she's back on it for another 8 weeks. So that's another reason why I felt bad, is because she's confined in this crate for like that's 16 weeks. So the whole way around, I just felt awful for her, and I was scared. I just, wanted her to be okay. And I got a lot of backlash. There was a lot of people telling me, just put her down, it's not worth it, that's too much money to be putting into an animal. I was going through the worst thing possible, and then to have so much negativity on top of that, it was hard to handle. So she restarted her rehab process, she restarted her recovery, and she was just a trooper. She was a real superstar. She just inspires me so much. So her neurologist at her follow-up appointment was like, look, there's a procedure called a PLDA, pure cutaneous laser disc ablation. I had to think about that. And it will reduce the risk of a herniation from ever happening again for around, it brings it down to about a 5% chance. And right now I think he said it was like about a 25-ish% chance. So he was suggesting that in the future we go through with that. So we waited for her recovery process. She was doing rehab, getting strong, getting everything back to how she was. So in September, she went through with the PLDA procedure. She did have a little bit of a complication afterwards, and we still don't really know what the heck happened, but after her surgery, she came like barreling out of the door like nothing even happened, like a rock star. She was doing awesome, and then we brought her home, and she seemed to be having a lot of pain, and we couldn't pinpoint where it was, but they gave her medicine, they told us to let her rest, and we did, and it went away. So we still don't really know what happened, but yeah, so Sophie had to have 3 surgeries this last year, and it has just been an emotional roller coaster. Somebody had recently asked me how I got through it, and I honestly don't know. When I think back, I just think of just pure stress, just crying and anxiety, not the what ifs, the not knowing what's going to happen. It was just horrible. I will say though, I think what truly got me through is definitely my fiance Tyler. He was super supportive, like I said, and couldn't ask for anything more. And my supportive family members that I did have, and the support of our fans on TikTok, like the people that have been there since day one, new people that found her story, everyone just came in and were just pouring love and support onto us, and I will never forget that. As you can imagine, the cost was substantial.